Mistress made pregnant wife. Clean her shoes, millionaire called it character building. From the outside, the Harrison mansion sparkled with the allure of unimaginable wealth and luxury. Beyond the marble pillars, the gold-plated banisters, and the immaculately trimmed hedges, however, lay a storm of secrets that threatened to tear the family apart. In the dead of night, a single act of cruelty would set off a chain reaction of betrayal and heartache. A mistress's demand that the millionaire's pregnant wife humble herself by cleaning her shoes. This so-called character-building exercise, endorsed by the billionaire himself, exposed layers of deceit that neither money nor power could keep concealed. And what unspooled from that moment would change them all forever. Late afternoon sunlight slanted through the tall windows of the Harrison mansion's living room, catching specks of dust in delicate golden beams. Evelyn Harrison, 7 months pregnant and exhausted, eased herself onto an ornate, hand-carved sofa. Sweat clung to her brow despite the gentle hum of air conditioning. The baby within her shifted, and Evelyn winced both from the physical discomfort and the emotional toll her predicament had exacted on her. Just a few minutes earlier, she had received a text from her husband, Arthur Harrison, instructing her to greet a visitor he called a dear friend. The text was curt, lacking any note of affection. After years of a lukewarm marriage, Evelyn recognized the signs that something was brewing behind the scenes. Arthur, a charismatic, self-made millionaire whose image exuded generosity and philanthropy, had changed. In the early years of their relationship, he had showered her with grand gestures and public declarations of love. But over time, these displays had evaporated, leaving only scraps of communication and a coldness that seeped into every corner of their grand home. The ring of the doorbell disrupted Evelyn's thoughts. She pushed herself upright and walked slowly through the hallway with its glossy marble floors and imposing portraits of Arthur's ancestors. When she opened the door, she came face to face with a striking woman who introduced herself as Clarissa Moore, dressed in a sleek designer suit and wearing towering stilettos. Clarissa emanated confidence and something else, an undercurrent of triumph, as though she had already won a battle that Evelyn didn't know had been fought. Evelyn, initially disarmed by Clarissa's poise, tried to maintain composure. She invited Clarissa inside. The woman's eyes roamed over the expensive artwork on the walls, the antique vases perched on side tables, and the gold-accented chandelier sparkling overhead. Then Clarissa locked her gaze on Evelyn's belly and smiled, though the expression was devoid of warmth. "Arthur insisted I wait here until he arrives," Clarissa said, glancing at her diamond-studded watch. "He should be here shortly." As Evelyn guided her into the living room, she couldn't help but wonder who Clarissa Moore was, this polished stranger that Arthur had so emphatically called a dear friend. Deep down, an uncomfortable chill spread through her, hinting at the trouble that was about to descend upon her life. Arthur Harrison swept into the living room nearly an hour later, carrying an air of barely contained excitement. He gave Clarissa a nod and then turned to Evelyn, offering her a perfunctory peck on the cheek. As usual, he did not linger near her or acknowledge her pregnancy with the tenderness one might expect. Instead, he seemed impatient, like a man with a secret he was dying to unveil. "Evelyn," he said in a measured tone, "I see you've met Clarissa. She'll be staying with us for a while." Evelyn's eyes widened in surprise. Arthur had never mentioned a house guest, especially not one as apparently close to him as Clarissa seemed to be. Before she could respond, Clarissa chimed in with a sultry laugh. "Arthur, darling, you can't just spring this on her without a proper explanation. Even if this is your home, it's still her territory." The moment was thick with tension. Evelyn forced a smile, trying to maintain a polite demeanor despite the storm of questions swirling inside her. "It's no trouble at all," she said softly, though the unsteadiness of her voice betrayed her confusion. We have more than enough rooms." Arthur's bright smile hardened into a sort of commanding grin. "That's settled then. Clarissa will be in the guest suite down the hall from our master bedroom." His gaze flickered to Evelyn's midsection, and for a second she thought she saw a flash of discomfort in his eyes, though it vanished as quickly as it appeared. As Arthur and Clarissa disappeared to discuss arrangements, Evelyn sank onto the sofa once more. Something about Clarissa's presence rattled her. Even beyond the woman's confidence, there was a proprietary air in how she moved through the mansion, studying every detail as if she were appraising it for her personal use. Evelyn whispered under her breath, "Who are you really?" By the time they returned, Arthur stood protectively close to Clarissa. He placed a hand on her back in a gesture that seemed far too intimate for a mere friend. Evelyn's heart dropped. She understood in that moment that Clarissa was not merely a passing acquaintance. Though she couldn't yet voice the enormity of her suspicions, the seeds of uncertainty and dread had been planted in her mind, and they were already taking root. Dinner that evening was a stilted affair. The long mahogany table, set with gleaming silverware and crystal glassware, only served to amplify the awkward tension. Despite the sumptuous aroma of lemon-roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes and grilled asparagus, no one seemed particularly interested in eating. Evelyn toyed with her fork, pushing peas around her plate and glancing between Arthur and Clarissa, who were engaged in a low-voiced conversation that hardly included her. It felt like she was invisible in her own home. She noticed small details that unsettled her, the way Clarissa reached for Arthur's hand when he was mid-sentence, or how Arthur's gaze lingered on the elegant curve of Clarissa's neck, longer than what was typical of platonic acquaintances. The pregnant swell of Evelyn's belly felt more pronounced than ever, as if it too sensed the tension in the room. "I heard you two were in Brazil last summer," Clarissa eventually said, turning to Evelyn with a pointed smile. "Arthur told me about your travels. Such a romantic destination." Evelyn nodded, though she felt a lump form in her throat. Brazil had been their last attempt at rekindling romance. Arthur had promised candlelit dinners on the beach, scenic tours, and renewing their bond. Instead, he'd spent most of the trip cloistered in phone calls and business meetings. Evelyn remembered staring at the waves, alone, feeling abandoned and distant from him. She wondered now if Clarissa had been on the other end of those phone calls. Arthur cleared his throat. "That's enough about the past. We have more pressing matters." He laid down his napkin and looked first at Clarissa, then at Evelyn. "Clarissa will be helping me finalize a new venture. We'll be working closely, so I expect full cooperation in this house." "Understood." Though his words were directed at both women, Evelyn felt the weight of them settle on her shoulders. Arthur was drawing a line in the sand, an implicit warning that she should not interfere with his plans. Clarissa took a long sip of her wine, eyes never leaving Evelyn. "I'm sure Evelyn will do her best to accommodate, especially while carrying a new heir to the Harrison fortune." There was a sharp undertone in her voice that transformed the mention of Evelyn's pregnancy into a veiled barb. The tension pressed down on all three, thick as the humidity of a thunderstorm about to break. Evelyn could feel it closing in like dark clouds gathering over the horizon. Days turned into a haze of uncomfortable interactions. Clarissa's presence permeated every corner of the mansion, from the private library where she pored over Arthur's business documents to the lavish sunroom where she often lounged, flipping through fashion magazines. Evelyn found herself shrinking in her own home, seeking refuge in the nursery she was painstakingly decorating for her unborn child. The nursery was a pastel haven of soft blues, greens, and gentle yellows, a retreat from the swirling maelstrom of tension beyond its walls. Evelyn spent hours there, repositioning a plush rocking chair, organizing baby clothes, and folding tiny socks with trembling hands. She tried to focus on the excitement of becoming a mother, but thoughts of Clarissa and Arthur nagged at her conscience. Every so often, she felt a flutter in her belly, a reminder of the precious life growing inside her, a life she had to protect at all costs. One afternoon she heard the click of high heels in the hallway. Clarissa's voice, cool and amused, floated through the door. Evelyn stiffened. Moments later, Clarissa appeared in the nursery doorway, crossing her arms over her chest as she surveyed the decorations with an appraising eye. "This is lovely," Clarissa said, stepping inside and trailing her manicured nails along the edge of the crib. She paused, glancing at Evelyn. "I can see you're putting a lot of effort into it." Evelyn stood, one hand on her belly. "I want everything to be perfect for the baby." Clarissa's lips curved into a mysterious smile. "Well, Arthur wants perfection in all aspects of life, doesn't he?" She moved closer, her gaze flicking to Evelyn's belly. "He wants a capable partner, a woman who can hold her own in his world. Are you sure you're up for the challenge?" Heat rose in Evelyn's cheeks. "I'm still his wife." "Indeed." Clarissa's tone dripped with condescension. "And yet you seem more like a caretaker. There's a difference." She spun on her heel, flipping a lock of dark hair over her shoulder. "I suggest you keep that in mind." As Clarissa left the room, Evelyn sank into the rocking chair. For a moment her chest felt tight, and tears welled in her eyes. She realized how isolated she had become, how tenuous her position was in her own marriage. But somewhere in the back of her mind, defiance stirred. She would not let this woman and Arthur's peculiar indifference ruin her life without a fight. That evening, while Arthur was out at a business meeting, Clarissa took it upon herself to keep Evelyn company. She found Evelyn in the mansion's expansive kitchen, rummaging through the pantry in search of something to quell her constant hunger pangs. Pregnancy had turned her into a perpetual snacker, and she found simple solace in preparing small, comforting meals. Clarissa perched on a stool at the kitchen island, watching Evelyn with an unreadable expression. She lightly tapped her manicured nails on the marble countertop. "You know, Evelyn, I've been thinking about how much responsibility you have. The baby, this giant house, it must be overwhelming." Evelyn kept her focus on chopping vegetables, though her hand trembled slightly. She didn't want to engage, but Clarissa's presence was inescapable. "I manage," she replied curtly. A hint of a smile played on Clarissa's lips. "Arthur has such high expectations. I remember when I first met him, his ambition was intoxicating. I suppose it still is. A man like him needs to be challenged, inspired. Tell me, do you challenge him?" Though Evelyn resented Clarissa's audacity, she couldn't ignore the kernel of truth in the question. Arthur had often complained that she was too passive, that her gentle demeanor wasn't suited to the cutthroat world of his business dealings. "We each have our roles," Evelyn said, keeping her tone polite. Clarissa laughed softly, a sound that made Evelyn's stomach churn. "Roles are important indeed, which is why I'm here, to support Arthur in ways only I can. Business strategy, networking, all the glamorous parts of empire building." Evelyn swallowed hard. She could almost taste the bitterness seeping into her mouth. "What do you really want, Clarissa?" For a moment, Clarissa's facade slipped, revealing a flicker of triumph. "To see this empire succeed, and to help Arthur shape the kind of life he deserves." Evelyn's hands stilled on the cutting board. She felt the baby kick gently, as if sensing her turmoil. How long had Clarissa been part of Arthur's life? Had their entire marriage been a sham, or had Arthur changed only recently? As Clarissa swept out of the kitchen, Evelyn's thoughts turned to the last shred of hope she clung to, the unborn child. She refused to be sidelined in her own life, but uncertainty gnawed at her, threatening to erode what little confidence remained. One night, Evelyn could no longer bear the tension and decided to confront Arthur. She found him alone in his study, a grand room lined with leather-bound books and dominated by a massive oak desk. Arthur was seated behind it, reviewing documents by the glow of a stained glass lamp. His tie was loosened, and the sleeves of his expensive dress shirt were rolled up. "Arthur?" she began softly, stepping into the study and closing the door behind her. "We need to talk." He looked up, brow furrowed, and motioned for her to sit. Evelyn sank into one of the plush leather chairs facing the desk, her heart pounding. She steadied herself, determined to maintain composure. "It's about Clarissa," she said, meeting his gaze. "Why is she really here? And don't tell me it's just business." Arthur exhaled, leaning back in his chair. For a moment, he ran a hand through his hair, an uncharacteristic gesture of stress. "Evelyn, I need you to trust me. Clarissa is assisting with new ventures, mergers, expansions, partnerships. She's exceptionally skilled." Evelyn swallowed. "But why does she act so entitled? She speaks as if she hesitated, as if she's more important to you than I am." The silence that followed was crushing. Arthur's lips tightened and he folded his hands on the desk. "Clarissa and I have an arrangement. It started with business, but it evolved. You might think it's inappropriate, maybe it is, but it's what I need right now. I've worked too hard to maintain this empire, only to see it falter, because my personal life isn't aligned with my ambitions." It felt as though the floor had dropped out from under Evelyn. She forced herself to keep her voice steady. "So what does that mean for our marriage? What about the baby?" His eyes shifted, betraying a flicker of discomfort. "The baby is still my heir. Our marriage, that's your choice, Evelyn, but Clarissa will remain in my life in some capacity. I refuse to sacrifice my future plans or my happiness. Not now, when I'm on the brink of something monumental." Shock, anger, and heartbreak warred within her. She wanted to scream, to tell him that he was throwing away everything they had once shared. But she could only muster a whisper. "Arthur, I don't recognize you anymore," he sighed. "People change, Evelyn. You must adapt or risk being left behind." A subdued gloom settled over the mansion in the following days. Evelyn moved through its halls like a ghost, her mind reeling from Arthur's admission. She'd lost count of how many evenings she cried herself to sleep, her hands protectively curled over her pregnant belly, as though sheltering her child from the chaos of its father's betrayal. Clarissa, for her part, seemed more present than ever. She hosted lavish soirees in the mansion, entertaining investors, socialites, and celebrities. The staff flitted about, ensuring every detail was perfect. Evelyn, whose role had effectively been reduced to that of a silent observer, found herself sequestered in the background. At these gatherings, she'd hover at the edge of the crowd, watching Clarissa steal the spotlight with her radiant smile and sharp wit, while Arthur stood by her side, pride shining in his eyes. One evening, as a charity event wound down, Evelyn overheard a conversation that would haunt her. She was coming down the grand staircase, exhausted from the constant swirl of strangers in her home, when she heard Clarissa's voice drifting from the foyer below. Yes, it's all going according to plan. Clarissa was telling an older man in a tuxedo who clutched a glass of champagne. She laughed, her tone low but triumphant. "Between you and me, Arthur and I have bigger plans than he's willing to admit publicly. Soon, the expansions, the acquisitions, everything will take shape. And Evelyn? Well, she's more concerned with painting nurseries." A chill coursed through Evelyn. She leaned against the banister, trying to steady herself. The knowledge of Clarissa's deeper involvement in Arthur's world stung. It wasn't just a fleeting affair or a dalliance. It was a strategic partnership with far-reaching consequences, leaving Evelyn as little more than a symbolic figure in the mansion. When the party ended, Evelyn retreated to the nursery. The gentle pastel walls and the faint scent of lavender helped calm her nerves. She switched on a soft lullaby from the crib's mobile, tears sliding down her cheeks. She was determined to protect her baby from whatever destructive future Arthur and Clarissa had planned. Even if it meant she had to stand alone, she couldn't let her child grow up amidst such toxicity. Somewhere in the corridors, she heard Clarissa's laugh again, echoing against the marble, and she knew it was time to muster her courage. She had a choice to make: fight to reclaim her place or vanish into the shadows forever. Fueled by a renewed sense of resolve, Evelyn sought the counsel of an old friend, Dr. Rachel Davison, who lived a short drive away. They had met in college years ago, bonding over their shared love of literature and coffee-fueled study sessions. Although they had drifted apart when Evelyn married Arthur and moved into the swirling world of high society, Rachel remained the one person Evelyn trusted enough to confide in. On a grey afternoon, Evelyn arrived at Rachel's quaint suburban home. The walls inside were lined with bookshelves overflowing with medical journals, novels, and poetry collections testament to Rachel's voracious reading habit. They sat at a small wooden table in the living room, mugs of herbal tea steaming in front of them. Evelyn poured out the story of Arthur's affair, his dismissive attitude, and Clarissa's brazen intrusion. She spoke of her emotional turmoil, her fears for the baby, and the feeling that everything was spiraling out of control. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she spoke calmly, determined not to let her pain define her. Rachel listened attentively, her professional demeanor giving way to genuine concern. She reached across the table, placing a comforting hand on Evelyn's arm. "My God, Evelyn, this is worse than I imagined." She exhaled heavily. "I want you to understand something. Emotional stress can be detrimental to your health, especially now. It's not just about you anymore. You have a child to think of. You need support." Evelyn nodded, her voice shaking. "What kind of support? Where can I turn?" "Arthur controls everything: the finances, the staff, even the media if he wants." Rachel took a moment to consider. "First, you need to secure your well-being. That might involve therapy or joining a support group. Second, you need legal counsel. A good family lawyer could advise you on safeguarding your rights and your child's future. And third, if the environment at home becomes too toxic, you should find a safe space to stay." Evelyn pressed her lips together, a lump forming in her throat. "I don't even know how to begin." Rachel squeezed Evelyn's hand. "Step by step. If you can't do it for yourself, do it for the baby." As Evelyn left Rachel's house, the sky opened up in a gentle rain. She tilted her head back for a moment, letting cool droplets fall on her face. For the first time in months, she felt a fragile spark of hope. Perhaps she still had the power to reclaim her life. Evelyn returned to the mansion with a plan forming in her mind. She had no intention of launching an immediate confrontation or making rash decisions. Instead, she would quietly consult with a lawyer and prepare a strategy, taking care not to tip Arthur or Clarissa off to her intentions. Above all, she needed to ensure the baby remained safe. She began by gathering documents. Late at night, while Arthur was out with Clarissa at yet another networking event, Evelyn slipped into his office. She meticulously copied bank statements, investment portfolios, and property deeds onto a portable drive. Every click of the printer made her heart race, but she persisted. She understood that knowledge was power, and this data might be her only shield. In those hushed hours, the mansion felt eerie, as though its grand rooms and corridors had taken on a sentient awareness. Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that even the walls bore witness to her clandestine act of self-preservation. Every creak in the floorboards made her freeze, terrified that Clarissa or Arthur would appear. Early the next morning, she left for a secret appointment with a high-profile family lawyer recommended by Rachel. She put on large sunglasses and wrapped a scarf around her hair in a timid attempt at disguise. Though she felt certain no one would suspect the pregnant Miss S. Harrison of anything. The law firm's office was located in a sleek skyscraper in downtown San Diego, miles away from the Harrison estate. Seated in a modern conference room, she laid out her situation to attorney Jonathan Pierce, a calm, sharp-eyed man with a reputation for handling complex family disputes for elite clients. He listened without judgment, taking careful notes. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. "You have more leverage than you realize," Jonathan said in a measured tone. "In the eyes of the court, your role as Arthur's legal spouse and the mother of his unborn child carries significant weight. The documents you've brought strengthen your position further." Evelyn exhaled, relief washing over her. "So there's hope?" He nodded. "Yes, but you must be careful. If Arthur discovers you're preparing for a legal battle, he may act preemptively. Until you decide to file for separation or divorce, I advise caution and gather as much evidence as you can of any wrongdoing, financial or otherwise." Evelyn left the office feeling emboldened. Though her path was far from easy, she at least had a map. Now she just needed the courage to follow it. Little did Evelyn know, Arthur's plan for character building was about to manifest in a shockingly cruel way. A few nights later, Arthur summoned her to the living room, where Clarissa lounged on one of the velvet armchairs, sipping champagne. Arthur stood by the fireplace, arms crossed over his chest, radiating an air of self-satisfaction. Evelyn, visibly uneasy, approached them. Her gaze flitted between Arthur's stern expression and Clarissa's smug smile. The baby moved inside her, as though responding to the tension. She rested a protective hand on her belly. "We have a matter to discuss," Arthur said, voice clipped. "Clarissa claims you haven't been a very welcoming hostess. She says you've been avoiding her, making her feel unwelcome in this house." Evelyn looked at Clarissa, whose lips curled into a taunting smile. "She's lying," Evelyn protested softly. "I haven't gone out of my way to be rude. I've just been busy with the baby's preparations, and your personal life can't become an excuse for neglecting our guest," Arthur cut in. "We're a family, after all." Evelyn's heart pounded. Family? She almost scoffed at the word. How twisted to call this arrangement a family. Still, she tried to remain composed, not wanting to spark Arthur's temper. "In my opinion," Clarissa interjected, swirling her champagne, "a demonstration of humility could help us start fresh. Don't you agree, Arthur?" Arthur's jaw tightened with what looked like reluctant acceptance. Or was it a performance? "Yes," he murmured. "It might be a good lesson in character building." Evelyn's eyes flicked between them in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Clarissa set down her glass. She extended one stiletto-clad foot, looking at Evelyn with a daring gleam in her eyes. "Clean my shoes." Time seemed to slow. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat, blood roaring in her ears. She stared at Clarissa's pointed heel, scuffed only slightly from the day's outings. A wave of humiliation washed over her, followed by a surge of defiance. Arthur's expression turned dangerously cold. "Do it." Evelyn could hardly believe the command had come from the man she once loved. Slowly, she sank to her knees, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. With tears burning in her eyes, she reached for the polish and a cloth. Clarissa smirked, leaning back as Evelyn wiped away the smudge on the leather. Inside, a piece of Evelyn broke. In that moment, she vowed that she would endure this humiliation only long enough to set her plan in motion, and then, finally, she would be free. The evening of the shoe-cleaning incident marked a turning point for Evelyn. Though her humiliation stung like an open wound, it also ignited a hidden reservoir of tenacity within her. She retreated to her bedroom, locking the door behind her, tears streaking her cheeks. She felt the baby kick more urgently, as though sensing her distress. Her reflection in the vanity mirror revealed disheveled hair, red-rimmed eyes, and an expression that flitted between rage and sorrow. She sat down, pressing her palms to her face. How could she have allowed herself to become so vulnerable? She remembered the bright-eyed girl she once was, full of dreams and hopes. That girl would never have let anyone degrade her like this. Determined, Evelyn fished out her phone and dialed Rachel. Her friend answered groggily. It was near midnight, but Evelyn couldn't wait. They made me clean her shoes. Rachel, Evelyn whispered, voice trembling. Arthur just watched. He called it character building. I've never felt so degraded. A pause on the other end. Then Rachel spoke gently, anger underlying her tone. Enough is enough, Evelyn. You need to get out of there. You can stay with me. We'll figure everything out from there. Evelyn swallowed. I'm pregnant. What if he comes after me or tries to take the baby away? Rachel's voice was firm. He can't. You have rights. You've already been to the lawyer. You'll be fine, but you must leave before things escalate further. The next morning, Evelyn called Jonathan Pierce again, detailing the humiliating incident. He listened intently and reassured her that such treatment could be cited in any future legal proceedings as emotional abuse. The knowledge gave Evelyn a semblance of relief, but she also recognized the risks of staying even one more day. Still, she hesitated. The mansion was her home, her child's inheritance, and symbolically, it was the life she had married into. Leaving meant acknowledging her marriage was truly over. The sense of failure and heartbreak weighed heavily on her. But as she stood by the nursery door, picturing her baby living in a home where cruelty was passed off as character building, she felt fresh resolve. She stroked her belly, as if silently communicating to her unborn child, I won't let you grow up in this darkness. Her decision made, she quietly began to pack the essentials. She didn't know exactly how or when, but she was leaving the Harrison mansion, and she wasn't coming back. Evelyn spent the next several days in a state of tense vigilance. She concealed her suitcase in the back of her walk-in closet, beneath a jumble of old clothes she never wore. Each morning, she awoke at dawn, rehearsing in her mind the steps needed to escape without tipping off Arthur or Clarissa. In the meantime, Clarissa strutted around the mansion with unrestrained confidence, hosting extravagant luncheons and scheduling private meetings for Arthur. The staff appeared torn between loyalty to their longtime employer, Evelyn, and fear of incurring Clarissa's wrath. More than once, a maid or a butler offered Evelyn a furtive glance of sympathy, but none dared speak against Arthur's mistress openly. Arthur himself had grown distant, though he occasionally tossed barbed remarks in Evelyn's direction about contributing more to the household or better adapting to Clarissa's presence. He seemed preoccupied with an upcoming business merger, one that Clarissa was helping to finalize. Rumors flitted among the staff that Clarissa had single-handedly secured billionaire investor Paul Whitfield's backing, thus vaulting Arthur's company to new heights. Despite her determination to leave, Evelyn couldn't help but feel pangs of sorrow watching Arthur from afar. She recalled the day they first met, at a charity gala in Los Angeles. He was charming and ambitious, sweeping her off her feet with grand promises. It was a whirlwind romance that culminated in a lavish wedding, pictures of which graced high society magazines. Where had that version of Arthur gone? She found herself in the nursery more than ever, gently folding onesies, rearranging stuffed animals, humming lullabies to calm her nerves. Each visit reminded her that she was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her child's future. She began writing letters to her unborn baby in a small journal, detailing her hopes and fears. One entry read, "My sweet child, if you ever read this, know that your mother loved you enough to leave everything behind so you wouldn't grow up in a home where respect was a luxury rather than a foundation." On the fourth night after her humiliation, the opportunity to leave arrived. Arthur announced he was flying to New York on short notice to finalize the business merger. Clarissa, brimming with excitement, accompanied him in a private jet. The mansion staff was given orders to keep an eye on Evelyn, but nobody could truly stop her once she decided to depart. As soon as Arthur and Clarissa were out the door, Evelyn placed a call to a taxi service, her hand trembling as she recited the address. With her heart hammering in her chest, she retrieved her suitcase and, under the cover of twilight, slipped out of the Harrison mansion for what she hoped would be the last time. Evelyn took refuge in Rachel's small yet cozy home. The guest room was simple, a comfortable bed, a writing desk, and floral curtains that gently wafted in the night breeze. It lacked the opulence of the Harrison mansion, but offered a warmth and sense of safety that money could never buy. The first few days were tense. Evelyn remained vigilant, half expecting Arthur to burst through the door at any moment, demanding she return. She turned off her phone's location services and avoided social media, wary of being traced. Meanwhile, Rachel proved a steadfast ally, ensuring Evelyn had nutritious meals, emotional support, and contact with Jonathan Pierce, the family lawyer. Jonathan arranged an urgent meeting at Rachel's home. He arrived bearing legal documents, a laptop, and a reassuring smile. "Arthur hasn't filed any motions or complaints so far," he began, settling into the living room armchair. "That suggests he may not yet realize the permanence of your departure. Once he does, we should be prepared." Evelyn nodded, her hands shaking slightly. "I'm ready. I just don't want to lose custody of my baby. Arthur can be ruthless when he feels threatened." Jonathan's gaze was steady. The courts don't look favorably on men who humiliate their pregnant wives. We have documentation of his emotional abuse. If it comes to a custody battle, we'll have strong grounds on your side. He tapped a stack of papers. "However, we should also consider negotiations. Sometimes a private settlement can be less traumatic." Evelyn exhaled, relief and tension swirling inside her. "I'm open to whatever protects my child, but I won't let him walk all over me anymore." Rachel squeezed Evelyn's shoulder in silent encouragement. After Jonathan left, the two women shared a cup of chamomile tea at the kitchen table, conversation drifting between legal strategies and the baby's future. "I've been thinking about naming the baby Elizabeth if it's a girl," Evelyn said softly, rubbing her belly. "She can go by Liz or Lizzie." Rachel smiled. "I love that. If it's a boy?" Evelyn paused, her eyes distant. "Maybe Henry, after my grandfather. He was kind, supportive, everything Arthur isn't." For a moment, the two friends sat in companionable silence. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the room. Evelyn felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps she could forge a new life for herself and her child, away from the shadows of the Harrison mansion. The journey ahead might be fraught, but at least she no longer walked it alone. Back at the Harrison mansion, Arthur returned from New York to discover Evelyn gone. He learned the news from a visibly nervous housekeeper who handed him a note. Evelyn had left. "Arthur, I can no longer live in a place where I'm treated with contempt. I refuse to subject our child to an environment built on lies and humiliation. I've left for my own safety and theirs." Evelyn Arthur's first reaction was anger. He stormed through the mansion, barking orders at the staff to reveal Evelyn's whereabouts. But no one could or would tell him. Clarissa watched from the sidelines, sipping a glass of expensive wine, a deep frown carving lines into her otherwise flawless face. She looked genuinely unsettled, as though she hadn't anticipated Evelyn's bold move. That evening, Arthur locked himself in his study with Clarissa. Tensions ran high. The veneer of their triumphant New York trip, where the business merger had been celebrated, was overshadowed by Evelyn's disappearance. "She's taking advantage of her position," Arthur snarled, pacing the room. "She thinks I'll be too distracted to come after her. I built this empire. I won't let her tear it apart with some sob story about emotional abuse." Clarissa set her wineglass down. "We need to be careful, Arthur. She's still your wife legally. If she has evidence against you, it could harm the merger. Investors hate scandals." He waved an impatient hand. "We'll do damage control. My legal team can handle it. I just need to find her." Clarissa glanced at him, a flicker of doubt crossing her features. She hesitated before speaking. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise. If she divorces you, you'll be free to... Arthur slammed his fist on the desk. Don't, he warned, his voice dangerously low. Do not talk about Evelyn like that. She's the mother of my child. Surprise flickered in Clarissa's eyes. I didn't realize you still felt protective of her. Arthur ran a hand through his hair, conflicted. It's not about love or loyalty. It's about preserving my reputation. Our unborn child is my heir. If Evelyn publicly accuses me of mistreatment, it could cost me everything. My deals, my standing, everything. Clarissa's lips thinned. She offered a nod of understanding, though her expression turned cold. Then find her. Fix this. Whatever it takes. Arthur began making calls, pulling strings to track Evelyn down. But as each lead turned cold, a simmering tension filled the mansion. For once, it seemed, Arthur Harrison, the man who could buy anything, found himself stymied by a woman he had vastly underestimated. Oblivious to Arthur's search, Evelyn focused on regaining her physical and emotional strength. During her first week at Rachel's, she slept more soundly than she had in months, despite the occasional nightmares. By day, she sought solace in small routines, brewing herbal teas, taking short walks in Rachel's flower-filled backyard, and reading parenting books. On a bright afternoon, she received a surprise visitor. The doorbell rang, and she peered out the window to see a familiar face, Michael Carter, an old college acquaintance who worked as a financial consultant. Nervous but curious, Evelyn opened the door, and Michael greeted her with a gentle smile. Rachel called me, he explained after she ushered him inside. She told me you might need some advice on your financial situation. I'm here to help, if you'll let me. Relief mingled with gratitude as Evelyn led him to the living room. She explained her predicament. Arthur controlled the bulk of their assets, and she had minimal access to personal savings. Michael opened his laptop, asking for any documents she had on hand. Evelyn pulled out the portable drive containing copies of Arthur's financial records. While Michael sifted through the data, Rachel hovered nearby, ready to offer moral support. After half an hour of intense concentration, Michael let out a low whistle. Arthur has a lot of overseas holdings. Shell companies, offshore accounts, nothing overtly illegal from what I can see, but definitely structured to minimize taxes and keep assets liquid. Evelyn's heart sank. So he can hide money from me if he wants to, Michael nodded gravely. Potentially, yes. But the good news is that you have the original marriage agreement, right? He tapped a page in the file. It states that, in the event of a divorce, you're entitled to a fair share of his earnings accrued during the marriage. Even if he tries to move assets, a skilled forensic accountant can trace most of it. Evelyn breathed in, trying to quell the wave of anxiety. So I'm not powerless? Michael offered a reassuring smile. Not if you stand your ground. With the right legal strategy, you can secure enough for you and the baby. You may also leverage the emotional abuse aspect to strengthen your case. The conversation that followed was exhaustive but empowering. For the first time, Evelyn realized she wasn't simply fleeing a toxic marriage. She was actively laying the groundwork for a stable future for her and her unborn child. And that realization fueled her resolve to face whatever Arthur threw at her next. A week later, Evelyn's phone buzzed with an unknown number. Heart pounding, she answered cautiously. Evelyn, came Arthur's unmistakable voice. Low and measured, you've made your point, but this is getting out of hand. Come back, and we can sort things out privately. A flush of anger surged in Evelyn. His tone still dripped with entitlement, as if she was a rebellious child. I'm not coming back, she said quietly. Not to that house, not to those conditions. Arthur sighed. You're forcing me to involve my lawyers. Do you really want our personal affairs dragged through the courts? Think of our child, Evelyn. The hypocrisy made her blood boil. I am thinking of our child, she snapped, voice trembling. That's why I left. And if you're worried about your precious reputation, maybe you should have thought about that before you humiliated me." A brief pause, then Arthur's voice took on a softer quality. "Evelyn, we had our differences, but I never wanted to hurt you. Clarissa, she's helping me with the business. That's all. Please, for the baby's sake, let's settle this amicably." Evelyn closed her eyes, fighting the impulse to believe him. "You showed me exactly where I stood in your life when you let your mistress treat me like a servant. Don't pretend you care now." Silence on the other end. Finally, Arthur spoke, voice hardened. "You'll regret this. I'm giving you one last chance to return quietly. I can provide for you and the baby, ensure you live comfortably. But if you insist on making me the villain, there will be consequences." Before she could respond, he ended the call. Shaking, Evelyn lowered the phone. Rachel, who stood nearby, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "What did he say?" Evelyn relayed the conversation. "He's threatening me," she murmured, tears brimming in her eyes. "He's acting like I have no right to protect myself." Rachel's jaw tightened in anger. "That's exactly why you need to keep moving forward with your legal strategy. Don't let him scare you into submission." Evelyn looked down at her belly, feeling a small flutter. It was as though the baby was reminding her to stay strong. Taking a fortifying breath, Evelyn nodded. "You're right. I won't be intimidated. Arthur Harrison will see that he no longer holds all the power in our relationship." As the legal proceedings loomed, the local media caught wind of the brewing Harrison scandal. A small gossip column ran a headline hinting at the couple's separation, mentioning an unnamed mistress who had wormed her way into the household. Though no official statements were made, speculation spread like wildfire among the city's social elites. Undeterred, Arthur and Clarissa threw a grand party at the mansion. The ostentatious display, complete with live music, a caviar bar, and a fireworks finale, seemed designed to project an image of unruffled prosperity. Guests drank and danced under crystal chandeliers, oblivious to the cracks forming beneath the surface of the Harrison empire. Meanwhile, in Rachel's modest living room, Evelyn, Jonathan Pierce, and Michael Carter convened for a final strategic meeting. Jonathan spread out documents on the coffee table, while Michael highlighted financial details on a tablet. "The public nature of Arthur's finances will be our advantage," Jonathan explained. "He can try to hide assets, but the court will scrutinize his holdings thoroughly once we file. More importantly, we have documentation of emotional abuse. Judges don't take lightly to a man forcing his pregnant wife to perform demeaning acts." Michael nodded, pointing to a chart on his screen. "This outlines Arthur's major acquisitions and real estate investments since your marriage. You're entitled to a portion of these gains." Evelyn, hands clasped in her lap, swallowed nervously. "I'm not just after his money. I just want enough to build a stable life for my child. And I want full custody, given the toxicity in that mansion." Jonathan offered a reassuring nod. "We'll do our utmost to secure sole physical custody for you, with supervised visitation for Arthur if necessary. The courts often favor the mother in such cases, especially if there's credible evidence of abuse." A flurry of emotion welled in Evelyn: relief, fear, hope. She thought of the nursery she left behind, the half-painted murals of cartoon animals that would never witness the baby's first steps. Though she mourned the loss of the dream she once held, she also recognized the courage it took to leave. This new chapter, daunting as it was, offered the promise of freedom and dignity. That night, after Jonathan and Michael departed, Evelyn stood in the kitchen with Rachel, sipping peppermint tea. The baby kicked again, as if urging her onward. She placed a gentle hand on her stomach and smiled faintly, whispering, "We're going to be okay." The court date arrived on a warm autumn morning. The world outside buzzed with everyday life, but for Evelyn, the day felt monumental. Clad in a simple yet elegant maternity dress, she entered the courthouse with Jonathan by her side. Reporters clustered at the entrance, cameras clicking as they sought to capture a glimpse of the scandal-ridden Harrisons. Arthur appeared minutes later, accompanied by his high-powered attorney and Clarissa. The mistress's presence was a calculated move, an attempt to demonstrate a united front for Arthur's personal and business dealings, perhaps. Onlookers gawked, but Evelyn kept her eyes ahead, refusing to meet Clarissa's smirk. Inside the courtroom, both sides presented their arguments. Jonathan spoke calmly and clearly, outlining Arthur's pattern of emotional abuse, citing the shoe-cleaning incident as a particularly egregious example. He also submitted photographic evidence of Evelyn's bruised, mental state testimony from friends who'd witnessed her despair, text messages showcasing Arthur's harshness, and medical notes detailing the stress she'd been under during her pregnancy. Arthur's lawyer tried to paint Evelyn as overly sensitive and melodramatic, insisting that the shoe-cleaning episode was a one-off misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But Clarissa, under cross-examination, slipped. She admitted to tensions in the household and inadvertently revealed that she saw Evelyn as an obstacle to Arthur's success. Jonathan seized on this slip, using her words to corroborate Evelyn's account of psychological cruelty. As the proceedings continued, Evelyn felt her pulse thrum with anxiety. She glanced at Arthur, remembering how, once upon a time, he had been the center of her world. Now his features were drawn tight with anger and frustration. Only when he delivered his statements did he attempt a veneer of composure, yet the judge's disapproval was palpable. When court adjourned for the day, Evelyn stepped into the hallway, shoulders trembling. Jonathan gave her a reassuring pat. "They see through his facade," he whispered. "It's looking good for you." Arthur paused near them, his expression unreadable. Clarissa hung back, watching him. In a moment of raw vulnerability, Arthur's eyes flickered with something akin to regret or longing. But it was brief, overshadowed by his pride and Clarissa's tightening grip on his arm. He turned away, and Evelyn was left to wonder if he ever truly understood the enormity of what he had thrown away. A week after the initial hearing, the judge granted Evelyn temporary sole custody of her unborn child and a substantial spousal support order, citing Arthur's pattern of emotional abuse. Furious, Arthur stormed from the courtroom, Clarissa at his heels. In the following weeks, Arthur's lawyers offered multiple settlements, hoping to limit his losses. Jonathan, however, remained resolute, determined to secure Evelyn and the baby's future. Despite mounting legal and personal pressures, Evelyn found solace in the everyday rhythms of Rachel's home. Her baby's growing kicks reminded her of why she had to stay strong. Meanwhile, gossip columns buzzed with rumors of Arthur's faltering merger and Clarissa's deeper involvement in his empire. In truth, the media attention barely touched Evelyn. She was focused on protecting herself and her child. At last, a final mediation date was set. On the morning of, Evelyn smoothed her maternity dress, whispered encouragement to her baby, and headed off to face Arthur, fully prepared to reclaim her freedom once and for all. High atop a downtown skyscraper, Evelyn and her team faced Arthur, his lawyer, and Clarissa in a final mediation session. The tension in the glass-walled conference room was palpable as Judge Bethany Klein-Rett urged both sides to settle. Arthur's lawyer opened with an offer granting Evelyn a generous lump sum, a luxury condo, and shared custody once the baby was born. Jonathan countered, seeking a slightly larger settlement and sole custody for Evelyn, due to Arthur's history of emotional abuse. Clarissa bristled. Arthur's done everything for her. Why should he be shut out of his child's life? Michael calmly reminded her of the documented mistreatment. Arthur, visibly agitated, insisted on unsupervised visitation. Evelyn, recalling her darkest moments, refused to yield, standing firm on protecting her child's well-being. After hours of negotiation, a tentative agreement emerged. Evelyn would receive significant financial security and sole physical custody, while Arthur could have structured court-supervised visits until further review. Though drained, Evelyn felt a glimmer of triumph. She had finally secured the freedom and the future she so desperately deserved. A few months later, Evelyn gave birth to a healthy baby girl in a private hospital suite. With Rachel by her side, she named her Elizabeth Grace, just as she'd planned. The first time she held Lizzie in her arms, tears of joy streamed down her face, washing away the last traces of the pain she had endured. The final divorce decree was issued shortly thereafter, officially dissolving her marriage to Arthur Harrison. The settlement terms were substantial enough that Evelyn could buy a modest but comfortable house in a safe neighborhood. She set up a nursery filled with stuffed animals, a bookshelf of children's stories, and the same pastel hues she'd once dreamed of in the mansion, only this time it was truly her home. Arthur's visits to see Lizzie were sporadic at first, each one supervised by a court-appointed representative. He'd arrive in a sleek black car, wearing a carefully guarded expression that suggested more regret than malice. Evelyn was cordial but kept her distance, fiercely protective of Lizzie. Clarissa, meanwhile, had taken on a larger role in Arthur's business ventures. Whispers around the industry suggested she was a brilliant strategist, but her personal relationship with Arthur had cooled. Rumor had it that the humiliation brought by the divorce scandal had taken a toll on their partnership. Regardless, Evelyn found she no longer cared. On a bright spring day, Arthur came for a scheduled visit. He held Lizzie gently, carefully supporting her head, the same way Evelyn had taught him. Watching him, Evelyn felt a pang of sorrow for the family they could have been. But she reminded herself the man standing before her was not the same one she had married. "Thank you for letting me see her," Arthur said quietly, his voice devoid of arrogance. He pressed a light kiss to Lizzie's forehead. Evelyn nodded, not quite smiling. "She deserves to know her father, so long as you meet your responsibilities." He swallowed, nodded in return. "I'm trying to be better." Evelyn didn't respond, but she appreciated the shift in his tone. In that moment, she realized she was no longer weighed down by bitterness or fear. She had survived, rebuilt, and become strong enough to stand on her own. Whether Arthur truly changed or not was no longer her burden. As the visit ended, Evelyn cradled Lizzie in her arms, breathing in the sweet baby scent. Outside, flowers were blooming, the sky a perfect shade of blue. It felt like a sign, a symbol of the new life she had fought so hard to create, and the boundless possibilities that lay ahead. Life doesn't always follow the fairy tale script. For Evelyn, her journey from naive newlywed to empowered single mother was born of heartbreak and humiliation, but it led her to discover a resilience she never knew she possessed. In the end, neither wealth nor status could shield Arthur from the consequences of his actions. And while Clarissa's ambitions may have soared in the business world, her grasp on the man she believed she had won proved tenuous. Evelyn's story reminds us that dignity can be reclaimed, even in the darkest of circumstances. No one has the right to strip away our self-worth, especially not under the guise of character building. If this powerful tale resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support allows more stories of courage and redemption to be told, shining light into the shadows and inspiring others to stand strong. Thank you for watching.
A glamorous charity gala turns into pure chaos when a jealous mistress hurls a cake straight into a pregnant woman's face, right in front of cameras and high society guests. Everyone laughs at first, until a powerful woman rises from the crowd and shuts the entire room down with 5 unforgettable words that change everything. What follows is a storm of public disgrace, courtroom justice, and one woman's rise from humiliation to power. You won't believe who steps in to defend her and how it all ends. Stay with me, and tell us what time you're watching and where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below, because this story is going to leave you speechless. The ballroom of the Los Angeles Grand Hotel shimmered under 1,000 golden lights. It was a charity gala hosted by Lang Holdings, one of the most powerful real estate empires in California. The air smelled of roses, champagne, and expensive perfume. Waiters moved gracefully between marble pillars carrying trays of caviar and crystal glasses. A soft jazz band played in the corner, their music smooth enough to hide the quiet tension that floated just beneath the glitter. At the entrance, the crowd turned as Evelyn Ward appeared. She was 6 months pregnant, dressed in a pale blue silk gown that draped gently over her baby bump. The color made her skin glow like porcelain under the chandelier light. Her dark hair was tied in a loose bun, a few strands framing her calm face. Her hands rested protectively on her stomach, almost instinctively. Every step she took radiated quiet dignity, even though she felt the weight of eyes watching her. Beside her walked Gregory Lang, her husband, the young CEO of Lang Holdings. His tuxedo was perfectly tailored, his smile perfectly rehearsed. The photographer's flashes seemed to favor him. He waved confidently, whispering polite greetings to board members and investors. To anyone watching, they looked like a powerful couple, but Evelyn could feel the space between them. He hadn't looked at her once since they stepped out of the car. Following close behind was Miranda Chase, Gregory's public relations director. Tonight she was not acting like an employee. She was acting like the star of the evening. Her dress was scarlet silk, tight enough to draw every glance in the room. The diamond necklace resting on her collarbone sparkled with a familiarity that made Evelyn's heart ache. She recognized it. It was hers once, a wedding anniversary gift. She had looked for it months ago, assuming it had been misplaced. Now she knew better. The three of them walked together down the aisle between tables, and the whispers began. Evelyn heard fragments as she passed. "Isn't that the wife? She's pregnant? And that woman with the red dress? She's his PR director, right?" The music seemed to slow. Gregory guided Evelyn toward their table near the stage, but stopped midway when he saw a group of investors. He left her side immediately, his hand sliding from hers without a word. Miranda lingered beside him, leaning close, laughing softly at something he said. Evelyn stood alone for a moment, surrounded by glittering strangers. She inhaled deeply, forcing herself to stay composed. The announcer's voice echoed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Dinner service will begin shortly." As the guests settled, Miranda's laughter suddenly rose above the hum of conversation. She had moved toward the dessert table, where a magnificent 3-tier cake stood waiting for the charity auction. The cake was covered in white fondant with gold ribbons, the centerpiece of the evening. Miranda's eyes flicked toward Evelyn, who had quietly taken her seat near the edge of the room. Their gazes met. Evelyn looked away first. "Oops," Miranda said loudly, pretending to trip. Her hand brushed the cake, but she didn't stumble. She turned, picked up a handful of icing, and smirked. "Oh my God, I'm such a mess." The room chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether to laugh or not. Then, in a flash, Miranda took the entire top layer of the cake and hurled it across the table. The cake hit Evelyn squarely in the chest. Cream and gold ribbon splattered across her face and gown. The sound was a soft thud, followed by a sharp gasp from 100 throats. For a split second, no one moved. The jazz band stopped playing. A spoon clattered onto a plate somewhere in the back. Evelyn froze. The cold frosting slid down her neck. She blinked, once, twice, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Her heart raced. She looked down at the ruined dress, then slowly raised her eyes toward Miranda. Miranda was smiling. "Guess you finally got a taste of what it's like to be the joke of the night," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Evelyn's chair screeched as she tried to stand. Her breath caught. "Why would you do that?" Gregory appeared beside Miranda, not beside his wife. His voice was calm, too calm. "She didn't mean it. Sit down, Evelyn. Don't make a scene." A murmur swept through the room. Someone whispered, "She's pregnant." Another voice said, "Did he just say that?" Evelyn's hand trembled as she reached for a napkin. The frosting smeared worse. Her vision blurred, a mixture of tears and disbelief. She wanted to leave, but her legs felt rooted to the marble floor. The humiliation burned deeper than the cold icing on her skin. Miranda tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Relax, darling. It's just cake." The audience began to stir. Phones were lifted discreetly. The bright red recording light from one of the cameras blinked. Evelyn caught sight of it reflected in the mirrored wall. A camera was filming everything. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Gregory leaned in slightly, whispering something sharp that only she could hear. "Keep your mouth shut, you'll ruin the evening." Evelyn's eyes glistened under the chandelier. She pressed a trembling hand against her belly, feeling the baby's faint kick. Her heart twisted with shame, pain, and something new, a spark of defiance she hadn't felt in a long time. Around her, the whispers grew louder. "Is someone filming this? This is disgusting. That poor woman." Somewhere in the crowd, a guest reached for her phone and began to record. Another turned away in discomfort, but the camera light on the far wall stayed steady, glowing like a tiny red eye that refused to blink. Evelyn stood very still. The frosting continued to drip onto the floor, marking a pale trail at her feet. Her face, though streaked with cake and tears, no longer looked broken. It looked awake. And above her, the camera kept recording. For a moment, the entire ballroom stayed frozen. The jazz band had stopped mid-note. Every guest sat in stunned silence, their forks halfway to their lips, their eyes locked on the woman in blue, who stood drenched in frosting. The scent of vanilla and sugar mixed with the expensive perfume in the air, creating a strange sweetness that made the scene feel surreal. Evelyn didn't move. Her hands hung by her sides, sticky and trembling. A chunk of the ruined cake slid from her dress and landed on the marble floor with a dull thump. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Somewhere in the back of the hall, a woman gasped softly. Across the room, Gregory adjusted his cufflinks as if nothing had happened. He gave a tight smile to a pair of investors who were staring, clearly uncomfortable. "Everything's fine," he said, his voice smooth but strained. "A silly accident." Miranda giggled beside him, brushing frosting off her hand with a napkin. "I'm so clumsy," she said sweetly, her tone dripping with mock innocence. "I didn't mean to ruin her dress." Evelyn finally looked up. Her cheeks were pale, except for the pink streak where icing met skin. Her eyes glistened under the harsh chandelier light. The humiliation burned deep in her chest, but she swallowed it down, the way she always did. A waiter, barely older than 20, approached hesitantly. "Ma'am, are you all right? Should I bring some water?" Before Evelyn could answer, Gregory snapped his fingers. "It's fine. Go take care of the guests at table 12. His tone carried the weight of authority, the kind that didn't allow discussion. The waiter nodded quickly and disappeared. Evelyn sank into her chair. Her breath came in shallow waves. She could feel her heart pounding against her ribs, faster and faster. The silk of her gown clung to her body, cold and sticky. She wanted to disappear. People began whispering again, louder this time. The noise rolled through the room like an invisible tide. That was no accident. Did he just let that happen? "She's pregnant. What kind of man does that?" Miranda leaned over the table, pretending to pour herself champagne. "You really should be more careful, Evelyn," she murmured, her lips curling into a smile. "You're going to stress the baby." The words hit harder than the cake had. Evelyn's fingers clenched around the edge of the tablecloth. She looked at her husband. He didn't meet her eyes. He was laughing softly at something Miranda whispered in his ear. The laughter sounded wrong, too loud, too forced. The host of the event stepped forward on the stage, trying to regain control of the evening. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice shaky, "why don't we all take a moment to enjoy our dinner?" But no one listened. Cameras were already out. The glow of phone screens filled the dim corners of the room. Some guests looked embarrassed, pretending not to see. Others whispered behind their menus. Evelyn reached for her napkin, trying to wipe away the frosting on her hands. Her movements were slow, mechanical. The napkin tore under the pressure. She stared at the ripped fabric for a second, then let it fall. Across the table, Miranda crossed her legs and smiled for a photo. One of the photographers, confused by the sudden commotion, captured the moment without understanding the story behind it. In the picture, Miranda looked radiant. Evelyn, in the background, looked broken. Gregory finally returned to his wife's side. He bent down slightly, pretending to check on her. His voice was low, but the coldness in it made her flinch. "Pull yourself together," he said. "People are watching." "I'm fine," she whispered, though she wasn't. "Good, don't embarrass me." "Do Khan." He straightened up and left again, returning to his circle of partners near the champagne bar. They avoided eye contact, unsure whether to continue the conversation. Evelyn's chest tightened. The noise of the room grew distant, as if she were underwater. She could still hear the faint laughter of Miranda, the clinking of glasses, the rustle of silk dresses, but everything felt muffled. Her mind drifted to the baby, to the soft kicks she had felt earlier that evening. She placed a hand over her stomach and whispered under her breath, "It's all right, I'm here." A sudden flash startled her. Someone was taking photos again. Evelyn turned her head just enough to see two women at the next table staring at her with pity. One of them mouthed, "Do you need help?" Evelyn shook her head slowly. She didn't trust her voice anymore. The ballroom doors opened, letting in a rush of cool air from the hallway. A few guests used the excuse to leave early. Their footsteps echoed as they walked out, the sound cutting through the heavy silence. Miranda raised her glass toward Gregory across the room. "To success," she said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "And to honesty." Laughter followed, forced and uncomfortable. Evelyn looked down again, her vision blurry. Her throat ached from holding back tears. She could taste the frosting still clinging to her lips, sweet and nauseating. Her body shook with quiet fury, but she pressed it down. Years of practice had taught her how to stay quiet. She thought of the night Gregory had proposed to her. It had been under a sky full of fireworks, his hand trembling slightly as he promised her a life of safety, of partnership, of love. She had believed every word. Now, that memory felt like someone else's dream. The band started playing again, a soft melody meant to smooth the tension. It failed. The music only made the humiliation louder in her head. Miranda stood up to go to the restroom, brushing past Evelyn's chair. As she did, she leaned close enough to whisper, "Next time, maybe wear something that doesn't look like a tablecloth." Then she laughed and walked away, the click of her heels echoing across the marble. Evelyn stared at her plate. The food had gone cold. The silver utensils shimmered in the light, and in their reflection, she saw her own face streaked with cream and tears. She didn't recognize herself anymore. Her stomach tightened. She felt a soft flutter beneath her palm, a reminder that she was not alone. That single movement steadied her breath. She closed her eyes for a moment and listened to the sound of her heartbeat. Slow, strong. When she opened them again, she noticed something. Near the chandelier, a red light blinked faintly. The security camera. It had been recording since the start of the evening. Her gaze followed it. The lens was still pointing directly at her. A faint sense of relief mixed with anger rose inside her. For once, there was a witness that could not be bribed or silenced. At the next table, an older woman reached out, touching Evelyn's arm gently. "Honey," she said softly, "do you want to step outside for some air?" Evelyn forced a small smile. "No, thank you. I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. She was planning. As she sat back, the whispers, the music, and the laughter blurred into a single, meaningless sound. The humiliation that had filled her veins began to cool, replaced by something steadier. Determination. Her fingers brushed the wedding ring on her hand. She turned it slowly, feeling the metal press into her skin. For the first time that night, she didn't feel weak. She felt awake. And somewhere deep inside her, a quiet thought took shape. This isn't the end. The ballroom had regained its rhythm, at least on the surface. The jazz band played again, but the melody felt hollow, like background noise to a conversation no one wanted to have. Waiters moved quietly, collecting shattered plates and melted icing from the floor. The guests tried to act normal, but their eyes kept drifting toward Evelyn, who sat motionless, her fingers wrapped around a napkin that had long since crumpled in her hand. Gregory returned to the table as if nothing had happened. He pulled out his chair, straightened his tie, and lifted a glass of wine. "Let's move on," he said flatly, addressing no one in particular. "It was just a misunderstanding." Across the table, Miranda smirked. "You're right, Greg. It was a misunderstanding." Her voice was syrupy sweet. "I should have been more careful. Poor Evelyn." The words, "poor Evelyn," dripped with mock sympathy, like poison coated in sugar. Evelyn looked at her husband, waiting for him to say something, to defend her, to acknowledge that what had just happened was cruel. But Gregory didn't even glance her way. He lifted his glass to toast with one of his business partners instead. "Accidents happen," he added, his tone sharp enough to cut through the chatter. Evelyn's throat tightened. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "She threw the cake at me. That wasn't an accident." "You." A few nearby guests stopped pretending not to listen. The air between them thickened. Miranda tilted her head and let out a soft laugh. "You're exaggerating again, Evelyn. Everyone saw it. I tripped. Ask anyone." Evelyn's voice cracked slightly. "You looked right at me before you did it." Gregory's chair scraped against the marble as he leaned forward. His jaw tightened, and his smile disappeared. Enough. His voice was low, but dangerous. You're making a scene. Everyone is staring. Oh. They were already staring, Evelyn said quietly, her fingers trembling. Gregory exhaled through his nose, his irritation plain. You're hormonal, Evelyn. You've been like this for weeks. You overreact to everything. She blinked, stunned. Hormonal? He shrugged as if that explained everything. You need rest. Maybe you should go home. I'll send the car. Evelyn's chest rose and fell unevenly. She wanted to shout, to stand up and remind him that she was his wife, not a child to be dismissed. But when she opened her mouth, nothing came out. The humiliation was too deep, too sharp. Miranda reached across the table and placed her manicured hand lightly on Gregory's sleeve. She's under a lot of stress, she said softly, pretending concern. It must be hard carrying a baby and worrying about all the company pressure. Gregory nodded. Exactly. She doesn't understand how hard this business can be. Evelyn's voice finally found its edge. I understand betrayal, though. A murmur rippled across the table. Someone dropped a fork. Miranda's smile froze for a second before returning, tighter this time. Betrayal is such a strong word, she said, her tone calm but her eyes glinting. Maybe you should choose something gentler, like misunderstanding. Stop talking, Gregory snapped, his composure slipping. He turned to Evelyn. You are embarrassing yourself. Evelyn's hands pressed against her lap. Her nails dug into the silk of her dress. No, she whispered. You are embarrassing me. He leaned closer, his whisper cut like glass. Don't test me, Evelyn. You know what I can do. For the first time that night, a few people at nearby tables shifted uncomfortably. They had heard him. The couple next to them exchanged glances. An older woman shook her head. Miranda stood, as if to draw attention away. Everyone, please, can we not make this into something dramatic? She said, smiling toward the room. We're here for charity. The attempt at humor failed. No one laughed. Evelyn felt heat rise to her face. She could barely breathe. Every nerve screamed for her to leave, to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She looked up at Gregory again, hoping to see even a trace of guilt, but there was nothing. His expression was carved from stone. A journalist approached carefully, holding her camera at her side. Mr. Lang, would you like to make a statement about what just happened? Gregory's eyes turned icy. If you print anything from this, Lang Holdings will sue your outlet for defamation. The journalist stepped back, startled. Miranda chuckled. See what stress does? She said quietly, just loud enough for Evelyn to hear. Evelyn rose slowly from her seat. Her voice trembled, but there was a calm beneath it. Do you really think you can control every story, Greg? Gregory's eyes narrowed. Sit down. I'm done sitting. A few guests gasped softly. Miranda's expression flickered between amusement and annoyance. Gregory forced a laugh, trying to reclaim his charm. My wife is tired. She's not herself tonight. Evelyn's gaze locked on him. I am exactly myself. You just stopped looking long enough to forget who that is. His smile vanished again. He grabbed her arm, not hard, but firm enough to warn her. Enough. The gesture didn't go unnoticed. Cameras flashed again. From somewhere behind them, a man whispered, Get your hands off her. Another voice said, This is going too far. Gregory released her instantly, but his anger simmered beneath the surface. You're twisting everything, he said, forcing a calm tone. You always do this. You make people pity you. It's manipulative. Evelyn shook her head. You've convinced yourself of that because it's easier than seeing the truth. Miranda let out a short laugh. Truth? Please. You live in your own little fantasy, Evelyn. No one's against you. You just can't handle not being the center of attention anymore. The words hit her like a slap. But instead of shrinking, Evelyn straightened her shoulders. The pain sharpened her focus. You can keep lying to everyone here, she said softly, but you can't lie forever. Gregory looked around and saw the growing number of guests watching. He forced another smile, the same corporate smile that had sold investors and charmed reporters for years. My wife is emotional, he said, his tone rehearsed. I apologize for the disruption. Evelyn wanted to scream, but she didn't. Instead, she sat back down slowly, her pulse pounding. The cameras caught every detail. The cold distance between husband and wife, the silent satisfaction on Miranda's face, the collective discomfort of everyone else in the room. Gregory turned back to his wine, ending the discussion with finality. Miranda leaned toward him, whispering something that made him smirk again. Evelyn stared at the tablecloth, her vision blurred, but inside her, something had shifted. She no longer expected Gregory to defend her. She no longer expected kindness or truth. What grew in that moment was something harder, clearer, resolve. As the waiters refilled glasses and the music swelled once more, Evelyn sat perfectly still. The humiliation still burned, but beneath it was steel. She glanced up at the chandelier, catching sight of that same tiny red light, the security camera still blinking steadily above them, a record of everything. And as Gregory and Miranda laughed together under the golden lights, Evelyn whispered quietly to herself, "You'll see. Everyone will." Her voice was too soft for anyone else to hear, but her heart knew. The night was far from over. The music softened again, but no one was listening anymore. The crowd had stopped pretending to eat. Everyone at the charity gala had turned into silent witnesses, waiting to see what would happen next. At the table near the stage, Evelyn sat still as stone, her pale blue gown stained and heavy. Her husband's hand rested casually on the table, inches away from Miranda's. Miranda Chase, dressed in red silk that shimmered beneath the chandelier, basked in the attention. She had always liked being watched. The chaos she created tonight had not embarrassed her. It had made her glow. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs slowly, the motion deliberate, a silent claim of power. Evelyn's eyes followed her movements. Her chest rose and fell with slow, shaky breaths. She knew Miranda was doing it on purpose. She also knew Gregory would not stop her. He was watching too, with that same detached smirk he used in board meetings when he thought he was in control of everything. The table between them was a battlefield. Crystal glasses trembled under the weight of tension. The silver cutlery gleamed under the light like tiny blades. Miranda reached for her champagne flute, her red lips curling into a small smile. "I should toast," she said lightly, "to unexpected moments." Her voice was smooth and playful, but her eyes never left Evelyn's face. Gregory chuckled. "Now is not the time, Miranda." "Oh, come on," she said, pretending to pout. "You were the one who said people need entertainment at these boring events." A few nervous laughs rippled through nearby tables. Evelyn's stomach turned. Miranda rose gracefully to her feet. All eyes followed her. She walked around the table, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "You know," she began, addressing the guests as if she were the host, "when you work with powerful men, you learn one thing. Success attracts envy." Gregory's face tensed. "Miranda." But she ignored him. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Some people think they can hide behind titles or sympathy. But the truth always comes out, doesn't it? The implication was clear. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Miranda was playing her like a game, humiliating her piece by piece in front of everyone. A woman at the next table whispered, "Is she really doing this?" Another guest, a journalist, raised her phone slightly, pretending to check messages but actually recording. Evelyn's voice came out low but steady. "Sit down, Miranda." Miranda turned slowly, feigning surprise. "Oh, Evelyn, I forgot you were still here." She laughed, a soft, cruel sound that echoed across the room. "You should really relax. Stress isn't good for the baby." Gasps spread through the room. Evelyn's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. Gregory said nothing. Miranda continued, her tone light but sharp. "You know, Greg and I have been spending so much time together at work. Late nights, long flights, board meetings. He's so passionate about the company, about everything." She smiled again, letting the pause linger long enough for everyone to understand what she meant. It's hard not to admire that kind of dedication. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to speak, but her voice felt trapped. Every word Miranda spoke was calculated, meant to wound her while appearing elegant. Gregory cleared his throat, finally looking uneasy. "Miranda, that's enough." Miranda tilted her head. "Why? I'm just telling the truth. Aren't we all here for honesty and charity?" Evelyn's nails pressed into her palms. She stood up slowly, her legs trembling. "You have no shame," she said quietly. Miranda's smile widened. "Shame? Oh, darling, shame is for people who lose." The crowd murmured again. The tension had turned electric. Gregory stood too, trying to regain control. "Miranda, sit down. Evelyn, please, don't make this worse." Evelyn's voice cracked. "Worse? You think I made this worse?" Gregory's jaw tightened. "You're overreacting again." Miranda reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen, and a photo appeared. She turned the screen toward Evelyn. "I thought you might like this one. Paris. Remember that conference you were supposed to attend, Greg? The photo showed Gregory and Miranda standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, smiling. His arm was around her waist. They looked like a couple on vacation. The entire ballroom seemed to exhale at once. The whispers grew louder, turning into small waves of shock. Evelyn stared at the image, her heart sinking. "You lied to me," she said softly. "You said that trip was canceled." Gregory's lips parted, but no words came out. Miranda slipped the phone back into her clutch with satisfaction. "He didn't lie. He just didn't tell you the full story." Evelyn turned toward her husband. "You let her humiliate me. Here, in front of everyone." Gregory lowered his voice. "You're creating drama. Stop." But Evelyn didn't stop. "She threw a cake at me. She's showing our pictures. And you still defend her." "Matt." The crowd fell silent again. Miranda, still standing, looked amused. "Oh, come now. Don't make this about jealousy. You're making people uncomfortable." "I'm uncomfortable because my husband brought his mistress to a charity event and let her attack me," Evelyn said. Her voice was shaking, but it was no longer small. Someone clapped softly. Then another person joined. The sound spread until a few guests were clapping, awkwardly but sincerely. Gregory's face turned red. "Sit down, Evelyn." "Lou." Miranda tried to laugh it off. "This is getting ridiculous." She took a step closer. "Maybe you should just go home. This isn't your world anymore." Evelyn's chin lifted. "You think I'll walk away so you can take my place? Keep dreaming." Miranda leaned closer, her perfume thick and cloying. "Oh, I already have your place. I just wear it better." The words sliced through Evelyn like ice. The sound of cameras clicking filled the air again. Reporters were capturing every expression, every gesture. At last, Gregory stood, his voice low but urgent. "That's enough, both of you." He looked around the room, forcing a hollow laugh. "Everyone, please enjoy your evening. We'll handle this privately." But it was too late. Nothing about this night was private anymore. Evelyn sat down again, her breathing unsteady, her mind spinning. Miranda returned to her seat beside Gregory, triumphant. She lifted her champagne glass and whispered something in his ear that made him smile again. From across the room, the tiny red light of a camera blinked steadily. It had seen everything. And as the orchestra played a cheerful tune to fill the silence, Evelyn stared ahead, her heart beating in time with the music, her humiliation complete. But under the weight of her pain, something inside her refused to break. It waited. It planned. It promised itself that this would not be the last time they saw her stand. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly as the next course was served, but the tension at Gregory Lang's table could have lit the entire hall. The servers moved in silence, aware that something had shattered the illusion of the night. Guests pretended to chat, their eyes glancing over wine glasses toward Evelyn, Gregory, and Miranda. The scene had turned from gossip to spectacle. Gregory lifted his wine glass again, swirling the red liquid, as if he could erase the chaos by acting unbothered. His smile was thin, brittle. "Let's try to enjoy the evening," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "No need for more drama." Evelyn stared at him, her hands trembling in her lap. The image of the photo Miranda had shown still burned behind her eyes. "You call this drama?" she asked quietly. "You call public humiliation entertainment?" Gregory's voice sharpened. "Watch your tone." "Or what?" Evelyn said, meeting his gaze. Miranda leaned back in her chair, looking amused. "Greg, people are still watching. Maybe she should go home." Evelyn turned to her, her voice steady. "You'd love that, wouldn't you? For me to disappear so you can finish your performance." Gregory slammed his glass onto the table. The sharp sound echoed across the room. Conversation stopped again. Every head turned. "Enough," he said through clenched teeth. "You've said enough for one night." The silence around them thickened. Evelyn's pulse raced. "You're not going to silence me this time." He leaned closer, his voice low, dangerous. "If you don't sit down and stop talking, I'll make sure you regret it." Evelyn didn't move. "How much lower can you go?" Miranda placed a hand on his arm, pretending to calm him. "Greg, don't waste your breath. She doesn't understand the position she's in." Evelyn laughed softly, a bitter sound. "Oh, I understand it perfectly. I'm the wife who kept quiet while you played king, and let your mistress mock me in public." Gregory's jaw flexed. "You should remember who built this life for you. The house, the cars, the comfort. It all exists because of me, so think carefully before you destroy it." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but not from fear. "I built it with you. You just erased my name from the door." His lips curved into a cold smile. Legally, everything still belongs to me. The words hit like a slap. Evelyn felt the room tilt. You'd use that against me? I don't use anything, he said, straightening his jacket. I protect what's mine. Miranda leaned forward. Greg, maybe she needs a reminder. You could have her credit cards frozen. That might help her rest. Gregory didn't even hesitate. That's already done. A few guests gasped softly. Evelyn blinked, trying to process what she'd heard. You cut off my accounts? You've been spending recklessly, he said calmly. I can't have that kind of financial instability attached to my name. You'll get an allowance. That's fair. Evelyn's voice rose. An allowance? You're not my father. You're acting like a child, he said coldly. Miranda's laughter broke the silence. Oh, come on, Greg. She's just shocked. It's adorable. Evelyn turned on her. You think this is funny? You destroy families for sport? Miranda smirked. No, I just remove what's unnecessary. No. Evelyn's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. You're disgusting. Gregory stood too. His height and voice towered over her. Sit down before you say something you'll regret. No, Evelyn said, shaking her head. I'm done being quiet. Everyone here saw what happened tonight. You let her humiliate me, and now you're threatening me in front of all of them. The whispers spread again. Cameras clicked. The security team at the back of the room looked uncertain, glancing at each other but not moving. Gregory looked around at the staring faces. His voice turned sharp and corporate. My wife is having an emotional episode. She's under stress. I'll ask you all to respect our privacy. Evelyn's voice cut through the air. Privacy? You made sure I had none. You monitored my phone. You sent assistants to check where I went. You wanted control, not a wife. For the first time, Gregory's composure cracked. His hand clenched into a fist at his side. You're ungrateful. Ungrateful for what? She said. For the privilege of being humiliated? Miranda rolled her eyes. Here we go again. Evelyn took a step toward her. You think you're safe because you're sitting next to him, but people like you always burn out when the spotlight turns. Miranda stood, her face hardening. Careful, Evelyn. You're forgetting who has power here. No. Evelyn Midherkes. Not for long. Gregory's voice dropped low. That's enough. If you say one more word, I'll make sure you never step foot in this city's social circle again. You'll lose everything. Your reputation, your friends, your home. The threat hung in the air like smoke. A few guests began quietly recording again. The flashing red lights from phones reflected in Gregory's glass. Evelyn's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. You already took everything that mattered when you stopped being human. He gave a short, humorless laugh. You think anyone here will take your side? Look around you. They all know where their money comes from. Around them, some guests looked down, ashamed. Others shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Miranda smiled again, her tone soft. See, darling? No one will stand up for you. You should accept your place gracefully. Evelyn's eyes burned, but her voice was steady. The thing about people who abuse power is that they always forget one thing. Power changes hands. Gregory scoffed. Spare me your speeches. The MC on stage cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to resume the program. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank everyone for their generous donations to... Gregory raised a hand to silence him. Not now. The host froze. The entire ballroom felt suspended between fear and fascination. Evelyn slowly sat back down, not because she was afraid, but because she could feel something shifting. For the first time, Gregory looked uncertain. The charm in his smile had turned into a sneer. Miranda's confidence wavered slightly as she noticed the guests whispering and filming. Evelyn took a deep breath. You think you can buy silence, but the truth doesn't need your permission to exist. Gregory turned away, his jaw tight. You'll regret this conversation. Maybe, she said softly, but at least I'll be able to live with myself. The orchestra began playing again, forced and shaky. Cameras still blinked in the corners, capturing every word. Gregory sat down, pretending to ignore the growing ripple of voices around them. Miranda touched his arm, whispering something in his ear, but he didn't respond. Across the table, Evelyn watched him, her anger cooling into something calmer, sharper. He thought he had ended the night on his terms. He didn't know the night was just beginning. Somewhere above them, the red light of the ballroom security camera blinked once more. It had heard every threat, every word. And Evelyn, for the first time in a long while, began to feel something close to hope. The charity gala that had begun with laughter and champagne now felt like a courtroom. The chandeliers sparkled above the crowd, but the air underneath them was heavy. Every guest sat tensely at their tables, pretending to enjoy their dessert while their eyes stayed fixed on Gregory Lang, his wife Evelyn, and the woman in red who had caused it all. Miranda Chase leaned back in her chair, still wearing her flawless smile. Her red dress shimmered against the gold light, drawing every eye whether people wanted to look or not. Gregory sat beside her, his posture stiff, jaw tight, and glass half empty. Evelyn sat opposite them, her pale blue gown stained with frosting and humiliation. Her hands rested on the table, fingers interlaced to keep them from shaking. The band played quietly, a melody meant to cover the tension, but no one was listening. Every word spoken at that table was a performance for the entire room. Miranda broke the silence first. "You know, Greg," she said sweetly, "I think we should just forget about the whole thing. After all, she's been through enough tonight." Her voice carried easily, soft but deliberate. It was the kind of voice meant to sound gracious while twisting the knife deeper. Evelyn looked up slowly. "You're right. I have been through enough." Miranda tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "I only meant that everyone makes mistakes. You can't hold grudges forever." Evelyn's lips parted, but before she could speak, Gregory slammed his hand against the table. The silverware rattled. "Enough," he said sharply. "Both of you." A few guests flinched. The music stopped again. Miranda gave a small laugh. "Greg, relax. You're overreacting." Gregory's voice grew lower. "You've embarrassed me enough tonight." "Embarrassed you?" Miranda's eyes flashed. "You told me to come. You told me I belonged here." Evelyn's stomach twisted. She could feel something shifting in the air, a new kind of tension building between them. Gregory leaned in close to Miranda. His voice was cold. "You're out of line." Miranda's smile vanished. "I'm out of line?" she said loudly enough for the guests to hear. "You said she was nothing to you." She pointed toward Evelyn, her hand trembling. "You said she was weak and pathetic." A collective murmur swept through the ballroom. Cameras flashed again. Evelyn sat frozen. Her heart pounded so hard she thought the whole room could hear it. Gregory turned pale. "Lower your voice," he hissed. Miranda stood up. "No. Let them hear. Let them all know what kind of man you are." She grabbed her champagne flute and lifted it high. "Here's to the man who lies to everyone, including himself." Gregory's temper snapped. He rose from his chair and grabbed her wrist before she could throw the drink. The room erupted with gasps. "Sit down," he ordered. Miranda yanked her hand free. "Don't touch me," she shouted, her voice shaking. "You don't control me." Security guards near the door started to move, but no one dared to interfere yet. Evelyn stood slowly, her chair scraping across the marble floor. "Stop it," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "You've both done enough." Miranda turned toward her. "Oh, now she finds her voice." Her laughter was sharp, cutting through the whispers. "You think you're better than me? You think wearing that pathetic dress makes you a saint?" Evelyn took a breath. "I think I'm done pretending." Miranda smirked. "Pretending what? That he still loves you? That this marriage isn't a business deal?" She stepped closer, her red heels clicking like a metronome of cruelty. "He's mine now. Everyone knows it." Evelyn's hands clenched at her sides. "If that's what you think love looks like, then you deserve each other." Miranda's face twisted. "You ungrateful woman. You don't even know what he's done for you." Evelyn's voice stayed calm. "He's done plenty. None of it worth remembering." Miranda's fury boiled over. She grabbed the glass of red wine from the table and before anyone could react, threw it straight at Evelyn. The liquid splashed across Evelyn's face and gown, staining the pale blue fabric with deep crimson. The room gasped again. Dozens of phones were raised now. The sound of camera shutters filled the air. Evelyn blinked against the sting of alcohol in her eyes. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then, a voice broke the silence. It came from the far side of the ballroom, strong and clear. "Enough." Everyone turned. A tall woman with silver hair and a sharp white suit stood near the stage. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes burned with quiet authority. Miranda frowned. "Who are you?" The woman took a step forward. "Someone who's watched enough cruelty for one night." "No." Gregory's face went rigid. "Mrs. Hayes, this is a private matter." But the woman ignored him. She addressed the entire room instead. "Private? You've made it public the moment you chose to humiliate her in front of everyone." Whispers ran through the crowd. The name Margaret Hayes spread like wildfire. Everyone in Los Angeles knew her, the chairwoman of Hayes Energy, one of the most powerful women in the state. Evelyn's breath caught. Mother? Margaret's expression softened for a moment. Yes, sweetheart. Then she turned back to Gregory, her voice as sharp as glass. You've just assaulted the daughter of one of your biggest investors. Gregory opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Miranda's confidence evaporated. She stammered, I didn't know. Margaret cut her off. You didn't care to know. That's the difference. The room erupted in murmurs again. Photographers circled closer. Margaret pointed toward the ceiling. Every second of this has been recorded. That security camera right there has been streaming live for the charity broadcast. A collective gasp filled the air. Miranda's face drained of color. Gregory's lips parted in horror. Evelyn stood motionless, her eyes glistening. Margaret approached her gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. You're safe now, she said softly. You don't have to take this anymore. Evelyn nodded slowly, the weight of the night finally hitting her. The crowd began to applaud, a hesitant sound at first, then stronger. Miranda turned toward Gregory, her voice trembling. You said no one would find out. Gregory's expression hardened. Shut up, Miranda. Don't tell me to shut up, she hissed. You promised me everything. Their argument dissolved into chaos as security finally stepped in. The two were separated and escorted toward the exit. Evelyn stood in the center of the ballroom, soaked in wine and frosting, but she looked almost radiant under the lights. Her humiliation had transformed into something else, something unbreakable. The applause grew louder. Cameras flashed like fireworks. And through it all, Evelyn stayed still, her mother's hand steady on her shoulder. For the first time that night, she felt seen. And for Gregory Lang and Miranda Chase, the night that had begun as a celebration had turned into the public end of their empire. The following morning, the bright Los Angeles sunlight spilled through the windows of Street Vincent Medical Center. The city outside moved as if nothing had happened the night before. But for Evelyn Ward, everything had changed. The gala was over. The humiliation was over. What remained now was truth, evidence, and consequence. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. A fetal heart monitor beeped steadily beside the bed, its rhythm calm and strong. Evelyn lay propped against the pillows, one hand resting on her belly. The baby was safe. The doctor had confirmed it twice, yet she still watched the monitor like it was the only thing anchoring her to sanity. Her mother, Margaret Hayes, stood near the window with her phone pressed to her ear. Yes, I want the full report. The footage from last night, every angle. Send it to our attorney's office and make sure the timestamp is visible. Her voice was composed, but underneath it was steel. She ended the call and turned toward her daughter. Do you feel all right? She asked, her tone softening. Evelyn nodded faintly. Physically, yes. Emotionally, I don't know. It feels like I'm floating between relief and exhaustion. Margaret moved closer, pulling a chair beside the bed. You were brave last night. Most people would have broken down. You stood your ground. I didn't feel brave, Evelyn murmured. I felt small. I still do. No. Margaret reached over and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. Small doesn't mean powerless. You stood in a room full of people who wanted to silence you, and you didn't back down. That's power. Evelyn's eyes welled with tears. He threatened me, Mom. He said he'd take everything away. Margaret's gaze hardened. He won't take anything. He already took too much. Now it's his turn to lose. The door opened quietly, and a woman in a navy suit stepped in. She carried a briefcase and a calm, professional air. Mrs. Hayes, I'm Detective Carla Moreno. I've been assigned to your case. Evelyn straightened slightly. Case? The detective nodded. Yes, ma'am. What happened last night qualifies as both physical and emotional assault. There were witnesses, and we already have multiple recordings. I'm here to take your statement and make sure you understand your rights. Margaret gestured for her to continue. Please, go ahead. No. Detective Moreno took a seat at the small table near the foot of the bed. First, I need to confirm that you're safe and that you consent to providing your account. Evelyn nodded. Yes, I do. The detective pressed a button on her recorder. For the record, this is Detective Carla Moreno, conducting a preliminary interview with Mrs. Evelyn Ward Lang. The date is June 14. The location is Street Vincent Medical Center, Los Angeles. Evelyn, can you describe what happened last night at the Lang Holdings Charity Gala? Evelyn took a deep breath. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied as she spoke. I was attending with my husband, Gregory Lang. His public relations director, Miranda Chase, was also there. During the event, Miranda threw a cake at me. Later, she threw a glass of red wine in my face. Gregory didn't stop her. He told me to be quiet, and when I tried to speak, he threatened to ruin me. You cried in. The detective listened carefully, writing notes. Did either of them physically grab or strike you? Yes, Evelyn said softly. Gregory grabbed my arm. It wasn't hard enough to bruise, but it was meant to scare me. Did you feel unsafe? Yes, and humiliated. There were cameras, reporters, investors. Everyone saw. Detective Moreno nodded. I've reviewed some of the footage. The evidence is strong. We'll be filing charges for assault and intimidation. You'll also be eligible for a protective order. Evelyn's eyes widened slightly. A restraining order? Yes. It will prevent him from contacting you in any way. He won't be able to call, text, or approach your home. If he does, he'll be arrested immediately. Margaret's voice cut in, sharp and decisive. File it today. The detective smiled slightly. Already in progress. She stood, gathering her papers. We'll keep you updated as soon as the district attorney reviews the evidence. I'll also arrange for an officer to stay nearby until we're certain you're safe. Evelyn exhaled shakily. Thank you. After the detective left, silence filled the room again. The monitor beeped steadily, the sound oddly comforting. Evelyn's gaze drifted toward the window. Beyond it, the city glimmered in the late morning light, calm and indifferent. Margaret sat beside her again. You should rest, darling. Evelyn shook her head. I can't. Not yet. I keep replaying it in my mind. The way everyone watched but no one said anything. The way he looked at me like I was the problem. Margaret clasped her daughter's hand. People don't always do the right thing in the moment, but they're doing it now. The public is furious. That video has already gone viral. Evelyn blinked. Viral? Her mother nodded. Half the city saw it before midnight. It's all over the news this morning. Gregory's name is trending for all the wrong reasons. Then, a small, bitter laugh escaped Evelyn's lips. For once, he can't control the story. Margaret smiled faintly. That's right, the narrative is no longer his. Just then, a nurse entered with a clipboard. Mrs. Lang, we're going to do another quick check of the baby's heartbeat. Evelyn corrected her gently. It's Mrs. Ward. The nurse smiled, catching the hint of strength in her voice. Of course, Mrs. Ward. No. The rhythmic sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room again, steady and reassuring. Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. It felt like proof that she was still standing, still alive, still moving forward. When the nurse left, Margaret stood and gathered her coat. I have a meeting with the legal team this afternoon. They'll start drafting the protection order and begin the divorce proceedings. Evelyn looked up at her mother. Divorce? I never thought I'd hear that word and feel relief. Margaret kissed her forehead. It's not the end. It's the beginning. The door closed behind her, leaving Evelyn alone with the gentle rhythm of the monitor. She glanced at the clock. Noon. Less than 12 hours since the gala, and already her life felt completely different. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table. A message appeared from an unknown number. You think you've won. This isn't over. Evelyn stared at the words. Her heartbeat quickened, but she didn't reply. She pressed the call button for the nurse. When the nurse appeared, Evelyn handed her the phone. Please show this to the detective. The nurse nodded and took the device. Evelyn leaned back against the pillows, breathing deeply. She looked again at the monitor. The baby's heartbeat was strong. The line moved in steady peaks and valleys, calm and constant. For the first time in months, Evelyn smiled. We're safe, she whispered. He can't hurt us anymore. The monitor beeped softly in reply, steady as truth, while outside the hospital window, the world kept turning. 2 days later, Evelyn sat in her mother's study, surrounded by quiet and order. The storm of headlines outside raged on, but here everything was calm. The room smelled faintly of leather and jasmine. Morning light poured through tall windows and touched the polished wood desk where piles of documents were stacked neatly. Margaret Hayes, always composed, stood behind her chair with a cup of tea in hand. Are you ready? Her mother asked softly. Evelyn nodded. Yes, I want to see everything. Lou. Margaret handed her a thick envelope. These are the preliminary findings from the private investigators. I warned them to be thorough. Evelyn took a deep breath and pulled the papers out. The first page was a series of photographs printed in color. Her own face stared back at her, bruised, tired, smaller. She didn't even remember when some of them were taken. That one, Margaret said, pointing to a picture of Evelyn standing outside the Lang Holdings tower. "A journalist caught it 3 months ago. They thought you looked unwell. I didn't know how bad it was until now." Evelyn turned the page. There were screenshots of messages, credit card statements, and travel itineraries. Miranda's name appeared over and over again. Paris, Chicago, Dubai. Every trip Gregory had claimed was business had been something else entirely. "He planned everything," Evelyn whispered. "Every lie, every excuse." Margaret's voice was calm but cold. "And he paid for it all with company funds. The board will see these documents by tomorrow morning. Misuse of assets, falsified expenses. It's enough to end his career." Evelyn flipped through another set of images. This time, the photos weren't of Gregory. They were of her wrist faintly bruised, her arm red from where he had grabbed her months ago. She remembered that night too clearly. He had been angry because she canceled a dinner meeting to go to a prenatal appointment. "I told myself it wasn't serious," she said quietly. "I even wore long sleeves to hide it. I thought if I just stayed quiet, it would stop." Margaret rested a hand on her shoulder. "Silence protects abusers, not victims. You are not the one who should be ashamed." Evelyn nodded slowly, her throat tightening. "I kept the photos. I don't know why. Maybe I knew I'd need them one day." "That instinct saved you," Margaret said. They continued through the evidence. There were text messages between Gregory and Miranda, careless and cruel. "Keep her busy with the baby stuff," one message read. "She doesn't need to know about Paris." Another message showed Gregory complaining that Evelyn's pregnancy was bad timing. Evelyn closed her eyes. "He talked about our child like an inconvenience." Her mother's jaw tightened. "The district attorney will have everything by the end of the day. This isn't just a scandal anymore. It's a criminal case." "Oh." The door opened quietly. Detective Moreno stepped inside, carrying a folder. "Good morning, Mrs. Ward, Mrs. Hayes." She gave a polite nod before sitting across from them. "I wanted to go over a few updates before you speak with the prosecutor." Evelyn straightened. "What did you find?" The detective opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, surveillance stills, and written statements. "We confirmed that Miranda Chase coordinated several of the company's overseas trips under false pretexts. Gregory Lang approved them personally. There's also a recorded phone call between the two of them made a week before the gala." She pressed a small device on the table. A male voice filled the room. Gregory's voice. "You're sure there won't be cameras?" Miranda's voice replied, low and smug. "Don't worry, I can handle her. If she makes a scene, she'll only look crazy." "Null." The recording stopped. Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. "He planned to humiliate me." "Yes," the detective said. "And the cameras he was worried about turned out to be his biggest mistake. Every second of that night is on record." Margaret folded her arms. "And the press? Public opinion is on your side," the detective replied. "But this case isn't about sympathy. It's about proof, and you have plenty." She pulled out a document and placed it before Evelyn. "This is a formal request for financial disclosure. Once the court signs it, we'll have full access to his bank accounts. The misuse of company funds will be clear." Evelyn studied the form. The official seal of the state gleamed at the top. "How long before it goes to trial?" "Preliminary hearing in 2 weeks," the detective said. "We'll request a restraining order today. He won't come near you." Evelyn nodded. "Thank you." Detective Moreno gave her a reassuring smile. "You've done everything right, Mrs. Ward. The hardest part is behind you." She stood, gathering her things. The truth always leaves a pattern. Once you start connecting the dots, it becomes impossible to hide. When she left, silence filled the study again. Evelyn sat still, staring at the photos on the desk. Each one was a memory she had tried to bury. Each one now stood as evidence. Her mother broke the quiet. "It's strange, isn't it? How what once felt private now belongs to the world. But sometimes that's what justice looks like. Truth in the open." Evelyn exhaled slowly. "He always said I was lucky to have him, that no one else would want me, that I wouldn't survive without him." Margaret's eyes softened. "And now you know none of that was ever true." Evelyn looked out the window. Below them, reporters had gathered at the gates, waiting for a statement. Her phone vibrated with messages she didn't want to read. News alerts, interviews, articles. But her heart was steady. The fear that once ruled her was fading, replaced by something stronger. "I used to think silence kept me safe," she said quietly. "But it only kept me invisible." Margaret squeezed her hand. "You're visible now, and powerful. Don't let anyone take that from you again." Evelyn turned back to the table. The photo on top caught her eye again. It was from the night of the gala. She stood frozen under the light, her dress ruined, her face streaked with frosting and tears. But behind her, the red light of the security camera blinked, proof that truth had never stopped watching. She took a pen and signed the disclosure request at the bottom. "Let's finish this," she said. Her mother smiled with quiet pride. "That's my girl." As the afternoon sun moved across the room, the walls seemed to glow. For the first time in months, Evelyn didn't feel trapped in her own life. She felt awake. She gathered the evidence into a neat pile, ready to hand to her lawyer. Outside, the sound of cameras clicking rose faintly through the glass, but she didn't flinch. The story was no longer about her pain. It was about proof. And proof, she realized, was louder than anything Gregory Lang could ever say. 3 weeks later, Los Angeles woke to a new headline: Lang Holdings faces collapse after scandal. The story covered the front pages of every major paper. News anchors spoke his name in sharp tones. Investors pulled out. Partners canceled contracts. Gregory Lang's empire, once a symbol of confidence and power, had begun to crumble overnight. Evelyn watched it unfold from a distance. She sat on the porch of her mother's coastal house in Malibu, where the air smelled of salt and lavender. The Pacific stretched endlessly before her, calm and blue. Waves broke against the rocks in a rhythm that reminded her of the steady heartbeat she'd listened to in the hospital weeks earlier. She had changed in ways that were difficult to describe. The exhaustion of fear had been replaced by a quiet determination. Each day began the same way now. She would rise early, walk along the shoreline, and breathe until her lungs stopped trembling. Then she would open her laptop and begin working on the next stage of her life. Her legal team called daily with updates. The divorce proceedings were moving quickly. The restraining order had been granted. Gregory was forbidden from contacting her or appearing within 500 feet of her home or her workplace. Miranda Chase had been fired from Lang Holdings and was under investigation for corporate fraud. On the morning call, Evelyn's attorney sounded almost cheerful. "He's losing control, Evelyn. The board voted yesterday to remove him as CEO. You'll receive the settlement and the public apology within the month." Evelyn's voice was calm. "I don't want his apology. I want accountability." "You're getting both," the attorney replied. When she ended the call, Evelyn sat quietly for a long moment. The ocean shimmered under the sunlight. It no longer looked like a horizon she would never reach. It looked like a promise. Her mother stepped outside, carrying 2 cups of tea. "I saw the news," Margaret said, handing her one. "They're calling you the face of courage." Evelyn gave a small, tired smile. "I'm not sure I want to be anyone's face. I just wanted to be free." Margaret sat beside her. "Freedom comes in many forms. Sometimes it's the right to speak. Sometimes it's the strength to stay silent." They sipped their tea in silence for a while, listening to the waves. Margaret turned to her. "What will you do next?" Evelyn thought about it. The question no longer frightened her. "I want to work again. But not in his shadow. I want to create something that matters." Her mother nodded approvingly. "You have the resources. Use them wisely. Build something that helps women who don't have what you had." Evelyn looked at her, a new spark in her eyes. "That's exactly what I was thinking." That afternoon, she opened her laptop again and began writing a proposal. The title read, "The Ward Foundation for Women and Children." The mission was simple: to provide legal and emotional support for women in abusive relationships, especially those without power or means. She wanted to build something that turned her pain into protection for others. As she typed, memories surfaced, the silent nights, the fear, the way she had convinced herself it wasn't that bad. Each word she wrote felt like reclaiming a piece of herself that Gregory had tried to erase. Her first call was to Detective Marino. "I'm starting something new," she said. "When this case is over, I want to partner with your department's outreach program. There are too many women who don't know where to turn." The detective sounded genuinely moved. "You're doing something important, Evelyn. The world needs more survivors who speak up." "I'm not just speaking," Evelyn replied. "I'm building." Later that evening, she walked down the beach barefoot, the cool sand pressing between her toes. The sky burned orange and gold as the sun dipped toward the horizon. For the first time in months, she felt peace in her own body. The bruises had faded, the fear had dulled, but the lesson had stayed. She paused at the edge of the water, looking out at the endless waves. "We're going to be all right," she whispered to her baby. Her hand rested gently on her growing belly. The wind carried her voice out toward the sea. Behind her, Margaret called out, "Dinner's ready." Evelyn turned, smiling. She walked back slowly, feeling the strength in her steps. Every day she felt more like herself, not the quiet wife who lived under someone else's rules, but a woman who had rebuilt her own foundation, brick by brick. Inside, the dining table was covered with documents, blueprints, and sketches. Margaret glanced at the pile and smiled knowingly. "So you're really doing this?" "I am," Evelyn said. "I'm naming it after Grandma, the Julia Ward Foundation." Margaret's eyes softened. She'd be proud. She was the strongest woman I ever knew. Now I think you've surpassed her. Evelyn laughed softly. "I'm not sure about that, but I'm trying." They ate quietly for a while, watching the sky turn from gold to indigo. The house felt warm and safe, filled with the simple sound of plates and the sea. After dinner, Evelyn received another call from her attorney. She stepped onto the porch to answer. "We've finalized the documents," the lawyer said. "Lang Holdings has agreed to transfer your shares and settle out of court. But there's something else. The board wants to meet with you tomorrow. They're offering you a position. Interim chairwoman." Quote. Evelyn froze. "They want me to take over the company?" "Yes. They say it's poetic justice. You were always part of the business, even if Gregory pretended otherwise." Evelyn stared out at the ocean, stunned. "I don't know if I want it." The attorney hesitated. "Think about it. Sometimes power in the right hands can heal what it once broke." She ended the call and stood there for a long moment, listening to the waves crash against the shore. The idea frightened her, but it also excited her. It meant she had a choice, something she hadn't truly had in years. Margaret appeared in the doorway. "Everything all right?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "I think so. They want me to lead the company." Her mother raised an eyebrow. "And what do you want?" Evelyn looked out at the horizon. "I want to lead myself first." The next morning, she woke early and stood by the window watching the sunrise. The sky turned from violet to pink, then to gold. She pressed her hand against her belly and smiled. The phone buzzed with another message from her lawyer, confirming the meeting time. But before she could reply, she opened a blank page on her computer and began to write something else, the foundation's opening statement. It began simply, "From silence to strength." The words felt right. They belonged to her now. Outside, the world was changing. Gregory's empire was collapsing. The cameras were turning to new stories, and for the first time, Evelyn Ward's life was truly her own. She closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Let's begin again." The morning of the press conference arrived bright and clear. The air in downtown Los Angeles carried the buzz of anticipation. Reporters crowded outside the marble steps of the Lang Holdings Tower, cameras poised and microphones raised. The building that once symbolized Gregory Lang's control now stood as the stage for his public reckoning. Inside the lobby, Evelyn waited with her mother. She wore a simple white suit, her hair tied neatly back. The color made her look calm, untouchable. Margaret squeezed her daughter's hand. "Are you ready?" Evelyn nodded. "I've been ready for a long time." The doors opened to a wave of flashing lights. The noise of voices and camera shutters filled the air. Security guided Evelyn and Margaret to the podium where the company's logo had been replaced by a new one, the Ward Foundation for Women and Children. The sight of it made Evelyn's chest tighten with emotion. She adjusted the microphone, her hands steady. For a moment, she simply looked at the crowd, taking in the faces of journalists, employees, and strangers who had followed her story. Then she began. "Good morning. My name is Evelyn Ward. I stand here today not as someone's wife, not as a victim, but as a woman who refused to be silenced." Her voice carried clearly across the plaza. 3 months ago, I was humiliated in this very city by the man who once promised to protect me. But that night did not end my story, it began it. No. The crowd quieted completely. Even the sound of the traffic beyond the barricades faded. "The last few weeks have been difficult," she continued, "but they have also shown me that truth has power. When people see injustice, they can choose to look away or they can choose to act. I'm here because I chose to act. I chose to speak, and now I choose to build." Behind her, a banner unfurled showing the foundation's name. The mission statement read, "Empowering survivors through legal aid, education, and hope." Evelyn turned back to the crowd. "This foundation will support women who feel trapped, unheard, or powerless. We will provide them with legal guidance, shelter, and education so that they never have to face what I faced alone." Applause began softly, then grew stronger until the plaza echoed with it. Margaret smiled proudly beside her, eyes glistening. Evelyn waited for the clapping to quiet. "I am not here to destroy anyone," she said firmly. "Justice is not revenge. It is balance, it is accountability. And today, that balance begins." As if on cue, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Across the street, cameras turned as two police officers escorted Gregory Lang out of the building. His suit was wrinkled, his face pale under the morning sunday. Reporters shouted questions, but he kept his head down. Miranda Chase followed behind, surrounded by detectives. The flash of cameras illuminated their downfall in cruel bursts of light. Evelyn did not turn to look. She kept her gaze forward, her voice calm. "For every woman who has ever been told to stay quiet, for every person who has been made to feel small, I want you to know this. Silence is not safety. Speaking up is how we heal." The applause returned, louder this time. Some of the reporters lowered their cameras, just watching her. It was no longer about scandal, it was about survival. After the speech, Evelyn stepped away from the podium. Margaret wrapped her in a gentle embrace. "You did it," she whispered. Evelyn smiled. "We did it." They walked together through the crowd, reporters calling her name, people reaching out to shake her hand. The noise surrounded her, but it no longer felt like chaos. It felt like life. By noon, she was back at her car. The city glowed in the sunlight. She leaned against the door for a moment, breathing deeply. The sound of distant traffic mixed with the wind, and for the first time in months, her chest felt light. Later that afternoon, she returned home to the quiet of the Malibu coast. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond the windows, calm and bright. She changed out of her suit and into a soft cardigan, then stepped onto the porch. Her hands rested on her belly as the wind brushed her hair. The baby kicked gently, and she smiled. "We made it," she whispered. "We're safe now." "No." Inside, her phone buzzed with notifications, interviews, invitations, congratulations, but she ignored them all. She picked up a pen and wrote a single line in her journal. "Strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to stand up again." The sun began to set, turning the water gold. Margaret joined her on the porch with 2 mugs of tea. "You're going to change lives," she said softly. "I just want to make sure no one feels invisible," Evelyn replied. They stood together, watching the horizon. The sky deepened to orange, then pink, then blue. The sound of the waves was steady, peaceful, alive. As darkness fell, the last light lingered on the ocean. Evelyn closed her eyes, breathing in the salt and the calm. The world no longer felt like a place that had hurt her. It felt like a place that could heal. When she finally opened her eyes, she whispered the words she would one day tell her child. "We survived because we told the truth." Moke. The wind carried her voice into the night, and for the first time in her life, Evelyn Ward felt completely free.